My name's Odellin. I was the quiet daughter, the one who never caused trouble. So, while my sister got a beachfront villa, I got a rejected lottery ticket, and a smile like it was a favor. But the real betrayal? It was never about money. It was the way they erased me with silence, with smiles, with applause that never had my name. Years later, that same ticket changed everything. But I didn't just win the money, I won the truth. And they never saw it coming. Before we dive in, where are you watching from? And what would you have done in my shoes? Let me know in the comments. It had been 3 years since I set foot in my parents' house in Jacksonville, and honestly, I wasn't sure why I agreed to come back. Maybe it was guilt. Or maybe some small, wounded part of me still wanted to believe I mattered enough to be seen. My sister Callista was graduating from her real estate program, and there was going to be a small family gathering, Mom had said. When I arrived, it was clear it was anything but small. Gold and white balloons arched over the front walkway, soft jazz played from a portable speaker, and trays of catered food were being set out on linen-covered tables. Even the napkins were monogrammed, Callista's initials in gold foil. She always knew how to make everything feel like her stage. And my parents? They were always happy to be her spotlight crew. I stood at the edge of the crowd, smiling politely at distant cousins I hadn't seen since Grandma's funeral, making small talk that barely stuck. When Mom finally noticed me, she greeted me with the kind of hug you give someone out of obligation, her perfume strong, her arms brief. "So glad you could make it, Odellin," she said, already turning toward someone more photogenic. Callista was glowing in a pale pink dress that probably cost more than my last month's rent. Dad gave a brief speech about resilience and grace, his words syrupy with pride. Then came the moment they'd clearly rehearsed. "We have a little something for our girl," Dad said, waving toward a man in a blazer who handed him a decorative envelope. "Callista, we're so proud of your journey. To help you start your new chapter, we're gifting you the villa in St. Augustine." The crowd gasped and clapped. The villa. A beachfront property I'd only seen once during a childhood trip when I was told not to touch anything. I felt the blood drain from my face. Mom turned to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "And, of course, we didn't forget you," she said, digging into her handbag. She pulled out a plain white envelope, smaller than the one Callista received, and handed it to me with a pat on the hand. "We thought this might inspire your next piece." I opened it slowly. Inside was a rejected airline ticket, dated 3 months ago. No note, no explanation. "It got returned," she added with a chuckle. "You always liked quiet places. Maybe this is a sign to go find one." There were a few awkward laughs around me. No one made eye contact. My name wasn't even listed in the program booklet, which lay half open on a nearby chair, all bold font and glossy photos of Callista's journey. I excused myself and slipped into the downstairs bathroom. I leaned against the sink and tried to catch my breath. My reflection stared back, tired eyes, lipstick faded, and an expression I didn't recognize anymore. That night, while lying on the guest bed in the room that used to be mine, now covered in old boxes, I opened the family group chat. A new post had just gone up, a photo of Callista holding the deed, surrounded by my parents and a few cousins. The caption read, "Our real gem. So proud of you, Callista." I wasn't tagged. The comments rolled in fast. "Amazing. Such a star. Always knew she'd go far." Nothing for me, not even a polite heart emoji. I locked my phone and turned away from the screen. My hand slid under the pillow, closing around the envelope I hadn't thrown away. The ticket, rejected, returned, just like me. For a second, I almost laughed, but it got stuck in my throat, sharp and bitter. In the stillness of that night, I remembered a birthday when I was 7. Callista had gotten a Barbie dream house. I got a puzzle from a gas station with half the pieces missing. Mom said, "It's good for your mind. You're the creative one." Dad added, "Don't make this a competition." It never was, not really, because I'd never been in the running. As I stared at the ceiling, Vera's words from earlier rang in my head. "You always liked quiet places." And maybe I did. But there's a difference between choosing silence and being erased into it. I guess this was my gift all along, I whispered to the dark. Not in anger. Not yet. But something had shifted. And whatever it was, it didn't feel quiet at all. I woke with the kind of heaviness that clings to your skin. The rejected airline ticket was still clenched in my hand, its edges now crumpled, the ink smudged from how tightly I'd held it overnight. I lay there for a while, staring at the ceiling of my old bedroom, if I could still call it that. Most of the walls were now stacked with storage boxes, a treadmill no one used anymore, and Callista's old prom dress still hanging on the closet door. I sat up and pulled my laptop from my bag, fingers trembling as I flipped it open. There was a folder buried deep in my documents, something I hadn't touched in years. It was labeled Villa Paperwork. I clicked it open and sure enough, there it was. The scanned draft of a deed dated 3 years ago. My name was clearly typed on it. Owner, Odellin Ray Marlowe. My stomach turned. Back then, I had just finished grad school. I'd come home for a few months while I looked for work. Mom and Dad sat me down one afternoon and told me they needed a temporary name on the deed to avoid some complicated tax implications. "You're just helping us out," Dad said, like it was no big deal. "We'll switch it over soon." I never questioned it. No one tells you the moment you're being used. It doesn't come with flashing lights or sinister music. It comes in the form of people you love asking for just one little favor. Now I realized the villa had once legally belonged to me. And now, it belonged to Callista. Later that morning, while the house was still quiet, I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a cup of stale coffee from the old pot. My parents weren't up yet. The silence was almost peaceful, until my phone buzzed on the counter. Callista. "Guess who's officially moved in?" The photo was a selfie, her in front of the villa, beaming, holding up the same keys I remember taking to the notary office with Dad. She looked like she'd won a prize. Her caption under the photo read, "Couldn't have done it without Mom and Dad. Feeling blessed." I stared at it, numb. My fingers hovered over the reply bar. I typed, "I thought I was listed on that deed." Then paused, backspaced, deleted the entire line. What would be the point? The thread went on, dozens of comments from relatives. "So proud of you. That's our girl. Mom and Dad really believe in you." No one asked where I was. No one even noticed I hadn't replied. That afternoon, Mom made dinner, some kind of chicken dish with too much rosemary. And Dad came back from the golf course, still in his cleats, tracking grass across the tile. We sat at the table like a family, the same way we used to, but everything had shifted. "So," Dad said between bites, "now that Callista's all settled in, maybe it's time you thought about somewhere quieter. Less stress." I didn't respond. He added with a smirk, "You're better off not owning anything anyway. Fewer headaches, right?" Mom chuckled like he'd said something clever. Callista just stared at her phone. I nodded once, but something fractured inside me. It was subtle, but sharp. Like a hairline crack in a glass that still holds water, until it doesn't. After dinner, I went upstairs and shut the door behind me. I opened the deed file again, staring at my name. I downloaded it, encrypted it, and uploaded a copy to a secure drive. Just in case. No one had yelled at me, no one had cursed or slammed a door, but I'd been erased with a smile. And somehow, that cut deeper. Lying in bed that night, I kept thinking about what Dad said. Not the words exactly, but the smirk behind them. "You're better off not owning anything." Translation: "We've already decided you don't deserve it, so be grateful for nothing." It wasn't about the house. Not anymore. It was that, piece by piece, they had taken away my space in this family, until I didn't recognize the shape of myself in it. As I turned off the lamp, I whispered to no one. It wasn't the loss of property that broke me. It was the loss of place. I kept playing Dad's words in my head like a scratched record. "You're better off not owning anything." It wasn't just a throwaway line. It was a belief. One they'd all carried quietly, like family heirlooms passed down without question. Odellin doesn't get things. Odellin doesn't belong. When Callista invited me to her engagement party the following weekend, I hesitated. The invite came as a mass group text, sandwiched between a string of emoji hearts and a selfie of her holding a champagne bottle labeled Bride-to-Be. I typed, "Sure, I'll be there," and hit send, even though every part of me wanted to throw the phone across the room. Mom followed up with a voice memo. She loved those lately. "It'll be small," she chirped. "Just family and close friends. You can help us set up the table runners when you arrive. You've always had an eye for detail." Translation: You're not the guest, you're the help. That Saturday, I drove to St. Augustine alone. No one offered to carpool. No one checked if I'd gotten the address. I parked 2 streets down because all the close spots were taken, mostly by her fiancé's friends from his tech firm, a group that wore polished loafers and spoke in abbreviations. The villa looked even bigger than I remembered, brighter, like it had been designed with people in mind. Not just a house, but a showcase. Someone had tied white ribbons to the palm trees and hired a string quartet to play under a canopy near the pool. As I stepped inside, Vera tossed me a soft smile. "Perfect timing. The caterers are late and we need to move the chairs outside. Oh, and make sure the welcome sign is centered. It keeps tilting." I nodded, saying nothing. Half an hour later, while adjusting one of the white lanterns near the entrance, I heard a small voice behind me. A little girl, maybe 5 or 6, tugged at her mother's dress and pointed at me. "Is she the maid?" she asked. Her mom chuckled awkwardly but didn't correct her. The laughter that followed was too soft to be innocent. I glanced over at Vera. She just blinked. Callista, across the room, caught my eye and shrugged, like, "What can you do?" Then she turned back to her glass of Prosecco, and the cousin asking about honeymoon plans. I smiled politely at the little girl. "No, honey, just invisible." No one heard that part but me. Later that evening, I slipped out before the dancing started. No one noticed I left. Not even when I passed Mom in the hallway, fussing over a missing dessert tray. Back in my apartment, I kicked off my shoes and opened the drawer where I kept chargers, receipts, and old tech cables. I just needed to plug in my phone. But my hand brushed something stiffer, something yellowed and curled with age. The ticket. The one they gave me that night like a joke. I'd tossed it in the drawer, meaning to forget it. But here it was, staring up at me. On a whim, I still don't know what made me do it, I opened the state lottery app on my phone. I held the ticket up to the camera. The scanner beeped once, then the screen lit up. "Congratulations. Jackpot winner. $150 million. For a moment, everything stopped. My heart didn't race. I didn't gasp or scream. I just sat there, blinking at the phone, waiting for it to correct itself, like maybe it was a mistake or a cruel prank. I checked it again. Triple-checked. It was real. I could feel the pressure building behind my ribs. Not joy, not even shock. Just silence. A thunderous kind of stillness. The kind that says, everything just changed. But the first thing I thought of wasn't shopping sprees or quitting my job. It was them. I pictured Vera's laugh when she handed me the ticket, the shrug Callista gave when I was mistaken for the maid, Dad's smirk over chicken thighs, declaring I didn't need to own anything. They couldn't know, not yet. I took a screenshot, locked it away in a private folder with a new passcode, and slipped the ticket into a zipped envelope, then into my fireproof safe. I labeled it "Art Supplies Do Not Toss." I sat on the floor, knees tucked to my chest, staring at the drawer for a long time. Maybe an hour. When I finally opened my phone again, the family group chat was buzzing. A photo from Callista. She was stretched out on a lounge chair on her new deck, oversized sunglasses perched on her nose, mimosa in hand. Caption, "This is what success looks like, blessed, boss babe." The comments rolled in. "You go, girl, so proud of you. Like mother, like daughter." No one asked where I was. No one asked how I was. I didn't type anything. But my fingers curled into my palm, and for the first time, I didn't feel helpless. I felt ready. "They never asked how I was," I said aloud to my empty apartment. That silence, it's going to cost them. Distance, that was the first thing I bought. Not a convertible or a trip to Santorini. Not some revenge shopping spree meant to prove a point. Just distance. A sliver of quiet between me and the chaos that raised me. A space big enough where no one could knock unannounced or ask for favors with fake smiles and implied guilt. I moved out of my apartment in Jacksonville on a Thursday. Quietly. I hired a moving crew online, paid the deposit in cash through a limited liability company the financial advisor helped me set up. Even the title to the house, a clean-lined, sun-drenched 3-bedroom in Pontevedra Beach, was listed under the LLC name. No trace of Odell and Marin anywhere. It was the first time I felt safe in my own life. I didn't tell anyone. Not co-workers, not acquaintances from college, not even the neighbor who used to bring me leftover casserole. The only person who knew anything was the woman managing the trust, and even she only referred to me by code. I furnished the home simply. Nothing showy, no marble fountains or imported chandeliers, just linen curtains, a deep leather couch, and silence. I woke up to ocean wind, worked remotely, cooked dinner for one. I slept without checking texts. My phone sat face down most days, but I watched. I never left the family group chat. I let the pings roll in like waves, and I never said a word. That's when it happened. Callista posted a video tour of the villa. Her voice was syrupy, all pitch and posture. "Hey fam, here's a quick look at what hustle and faith can bring you. Manifestation works, y'all. You just have to believe and grind." She twirled around in the living room like a realtor on reality TV. The video cut to the kitchen. The same kitchen where I'd once stood with Dad while he asked me to pick tile samples for his rental project. I froze the video at the backsplash. Ivory ceramic inlaid with soft blue waves. I had chosen that tile. For tax purposes. The comments gushed. "You're so inspiring, Callista. Boss babe energy? She's going places." I closed the app and opened it again. The same lies blinked back at me, dressed up as empowerment, and no one said a word about where that house had come from. That night, I poured myself a glass of water and sat at the small desk by the front window. I opened the digital folder labeled Tidehold Holdings and clicked on the PDF of the original deed. The name Odalyn Marin still appeared as initial co-signer back when it was supposed to be a temporary favor. I stared at it until my eyes burned. Then I closed the file, took a walk around the block, and came back to find a new message notification. It wasn't from Mom or Callista. It was from a woman I barely remembered. Someone who had attended the engagement party. A cousin of Callista's fiancé, maybe? Her message was simple. "Hi, this might sound weird, but that villa, it was meant for you, right?" I froze. She continued. "I overheard your dad at the party. He told someone, too bad she's not a brand. Would have made more sense to invest in her." I didn't reply. I read the message 3 times, then again the next morning. There was no anger in her words, just recognition. Like someone had finally looked past the surface and seen something they weren't supposed to. I sat with that message all day. In the afternoon, I returned to my desk, opened the deed again, then opened my email. To law@conveytitle.net. Subject, Notice of Property Inquiry. I typed the body of the email slowly, carefully. My hands didn't shake, but there was weight behind every word. The kind that says, "I'm not playing along anymore." But then, I didn't send it. Not yet. I let the cursor blink at me. Click, close, save draft. That evening, Callista posted a selfie on the villa porch, her feet kicked up, cocktail in hand. The caption, "Peace earned." I didn't like the photo. I didn't comment. But I did take another sip of my tea, walked out onto my own balcony, and breathed in the salt air she didn't know I had first picked. Distance isn't cold, it's survival. I stared at the draft email for what felt like hours. Then, with one small flick of my finger, I deleted it. No regrets, just finality. Instead of sending, I opened the voice memo app on my phone. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Maybe something to remind me I wasn't crazy. Some audio proof that the story I'd been telling myself all these years, the one where I was just the overlooked daughter, wasn't all in my head. I scrolled past grocery lists, client meeting notes, and the occasional reminder to myself to buy milk. Then I saw it. An untitled recording from over a year ago, right around the time of Callista's graduation brunch. It was long, over 40 minutes. I tapped play. At first, it was just the clatter of silverware and half-muffled conversations, plates being passed, someone laughing in the distance. Then I heard it. My mother's voice. "You know," Vera said casually, like she was commenting on the weather, Odellen's sweet, but she wasn't built for success. She's too passive. Someone, probably Callista, chuckled. She still makes those mood boards, doesn't she? Then my father. She's always had her head in the clouds. Callista, now you're marketable. The laughter after that wasn't loud, but it was clear, comfortable. Like no one in that room ever thought I'd hear it. Like I was the joke, and had been for years. I hit pause. My ears rang. I hadn't cried. Not when I left home at 23 with just a duffel bag. Not when they skipped my art gallery opening in Atlanta. Not even when Vera laughed about the rejected ticket. But now? Now I felt something different. Not sadness, not even betrayal. Clarity. They hadn't ignored me out of neglect. They'd dismissed me because it was convenient. They'd left me behind while still reaching into my life, quietly, cleverly, to take what they needed. The next morning, while pouring coffee, I noticed a notification from my financial advisor, Justin. Subject line, urgent, unusual credit activity. I opened it with a pit already forming in my stomach. Odellen, he wrote, did you authorize a soft credit pull this week connected to a loan application? The pull came through under an LLC name, Tide Hold Holdings. That's the structure we used for the house, right? It was requested by a lender based in your parents' zip code. I dropped the coffee mug. It hit the tile but didn't break. I called him immediately. No, I didn't authorize anything, I told him. He hesitated. Then we might have a problem. If that LLC was still technically under your name, they could be trying to secure a loan using your signature, without your consent. I opened my browser and started digging. The name on the inquiry request? A brokerage firm tied to St. Augustine. The listed contact? Callista's fiancé. And that's when it hit me. They hadn't forgotten me. I wasn't the invisible daughter in their story. I was the utility, the cosigner, the tax write-off, the quiet one who never made noise. They hadn't erased me. They were using me. The realization didn't come with screaming or breaking things. I just sat on the floor, back against the cabinet. My fingers were cold, even though the kitchen was warm. The weight of it wasn't grief. It was release. Like the last thread holding me to them had finally snapped. Later that afternoon, I opened the deed folder again. Not to cry over it, not to reminisce, to prepare. That night, I clicked through a few law firms, cross-referenced client reviews, and booked a consultation. I didn't want revenge. I wanted protection. When the assistant asked, "What's the nature of the legal concern?" I replied calmly, "They've used my name, my trust, my silence. I'm done waiting for them to stop. Now I'll make sure they can't." I walked out of the law firm with a manila envelope tucked tight against my chest like it was armor. Inside were the legal safeguards I'd hoped would be enough: updated LLC filings, cease and desist drafts, a firewall between my assets and my family's reach. I'd even filed a name change for the LLC, just in case. As I crossed the parking lot, a soft breeze swept through, pulling strands of hair from my bun. I stood there for a second, eyes closed, breathing in that strange blend of relief and tension. It felt like laying bricks between myself and the wreckage behind me. But by the time I made it back to my car, I already knew it wouldn't be enough. The next morning, as I sipped lukewarm coffee in my kitchen and tried to ignore the ache in my shoulders, my phone started vibrating nonstop. Notifications, mentions, tags. I tapped open Instagram. The first post that appeared stopped my breath cold. It was a slick, over-edited promo reel from Callista. She stood on a patio, the ocean in the background, wind tossing her hair just enough to look intentional. "Excited to launch my newest women's business retreat," she said to the camera, "proudly sponsored by a family angel at Odellen Design. Couldn't have done it without her silent support." My username, the one linked to my freelance design work, was bold, tagged, and now embedded in a campaign I had no knowledge of. I didn't even blink. I just hit the screenshot button. Then again. Then I opened my email. By noon, I had 34 DMs. Some asked how to register, others asked for my rate, but most were from strangers, people I'd never met, congratulating me on stepping up for family. One simply said, "Didn't peg you as the silent investor type." The kicker? I checked the retreat's official site. My name was listed as the lead creative sponsor. A photo of me, pulled from a years-old LinkedIn post, was cropped next to words like visionary, backbone, and private benefactor. I felt the bile rise. I'd spent years building a name, quiet but clean. Now it was plastered on a venture I didn't even know existed, one that likely used money funneled from my stolen LLC. But it didn't stop there. That evening, a colleague from an old gig sent me a podcast link. The caption read, "Influencer Sisters, How Family Can Be a Launchpad or a Weight." My gut twisted. Callista was the guest. I skipped to the 10-minute mark where her voice poured through the speakers. Smooth, honeyed, dripping with performative gratitude. "My sister doesn't like attention," she said. "But let's just say, she had a windfall recently. She's not exactly struggling. Sometimes the quiet ones do the biggest things." There was a long pause. Then the host laughed. "You mean she hit it big?" Callista chuckled. "Let's just say, the universe has a way of rewarding humility, even if she doesn't want to share it." It was subtle, passive, but anyone listening would know what she was implying, that I was the money behind her glow-up. My email pinged again, this time from a potential client canceling a branding session because they couldn't afford my influencer rates. It was unraveling, fast. I composed a cease and desist and sent it through my attorney. Attached every screenshot, every clip. 24 hours later, Vera texted me. "Was that really necessary? She was just trying to give you credit. You know she meant it as a compliment." I didn't reply right away. I paced my kitchen, chewing my cheek. Then I typed back, "Compliments don't cost people their peace." I didn't hear back. That night, while trying to settle into a documentary, my phone rang again. It was my attorney. "They filed a response," he said, voice clipped. "They're disputing your claim to the villa, preparing a counter-argument that the asset was always family intended." I didn't blink, didn't sigh. I simply said, "Then I guess we stop playing nice?" The evening air was still when I stepped out onto the deck, the phone call from my attorney still ringing in my ears. I set my wineglass down on the railing, letting the condensation mark the wood. Somewhere across the bay, wind chimes clinked faintly in someone else's piece. "They could have walked away," I murmured, "but I guess silence made them brave." The next morning started like any other. Coffee, email, a short stretch. I was halfway through responding to a client brief when the first alert came in. Subject: HOA Community Notice. Alert to residents. I frowned, clicked. It was a digital newsletter, one that usually covered landscaping tips and updates about trash collection delays. But today's featured note was different. It read, "A reminder to all residents. Please exercise caution with individuals who present themselves as generous sponsors, while entangling others in questionable property claims. Community trust depends on clarity, not confusion." No names, just poison, disguised as policy. My chest tightened, but it didn't stop there. 2 minutes later, a follow-up email hit. This one was signed by both Callista and Vera. "As a family, we're saddened by recent attempts to drag our personal matters into public spaces. While we continue to rise above, we regret that someone we once loved now uses our names to fuel false narratives and divisive threats." I didn't breathe for a second. I just stared at the screen. Then I leaned back in my chair and laughed. They had no idea what they'd just activated. Before I could even finish sipping my coffee, my phone started buzzing again, this time with cancellations. One client politely said they'd reconsider next quarter. Another directly asked, "Are you really suing your family?" By noon, my design page had lost nearly 800 followers. A project sponsor requested I remove my name from the credits. The silence I once relied on to protect myself, it was now being weaponized against me. I called my lawyer. "We're not responding through legalese," I said. "I'm done letting them own the air." Instead of a formal release, I called an old friend, Nina, who hosted a well-known real estate podcast in North Florida. 30 minutes later, we were recording. I didn't speak much during the episode. I didn't have to. Nina had all the documents. She walked through the timeline in detail. Deed drafts, emails, screenshots. She laid it out simply. The villa was initially filed in my name for tax reasons. The transfer to Callista happened without full consent or compensation. My LLC had been used again recently without authorization, and Callista had benefited from it all, while publicly erasing me. The comments rolled in fast. "That's not ambition, that's fraud. Why didn't she just say thank you and shut up? Tag your sister, coward." That night, I noticed Vera's Instagram went private. Callista's comments? Disabled. She turned off replies on 3 of her latest posts. I said nothing online. Not a tweet, not a clapback, not a single "I told you so." Because finally, people were asking their own questions. After dinner, I tossed the remains of my roasted carrots into the trash and set my plate in the dishwasher. I moved with a quiet steadiness, not triumphant, but certain. When I checked my email before bed, one new message sat at the top. Subject: about the villa. Urgent sender: Callista. I didn't click it. Not yet. The morning after forwarding Callista's email to my lawyer, I didn't check for a response. I didn't need to. The tone was clear, an olive branch carved from guilt and desperation. My breath fogged the kitchen window as I stood with a mug of tea in hand, watching the ocean pulse against the gray sand behind the villa. Their villa, for now, but not for long. I didn't text back. I didn't explain. Instead, I slipped on a blazer, gathered the files I'd spent months compiling, and drove to the ethics board building downtown, 15 minutes from the very beach where they'd once called me too sensitive to handle success. This time I wasn't walking into a family gathering. This was war, and it was quiet. The hearing room smelled like overbrewed coffee and stress. I arrived early, sat across from my attorney, and kept my eyes on the door. Callista walked in first, all white silk blouse and Instagram poise. Vera followed seconds later, lips tight, chin up, still wearing the mask of motherhood. Neither looked at me. We were seated on opposite ends of a polished oak table. A panel of 5 board members faced us, flipping through the printed binders my legal team had submitted. Original property contracts, email trails, bank transfers, the entire paper skeleton of their deception. My attorney stood. "We are here to present evidence that my client, O'Dellin, was not only the legal co-holder of the St. Augustine property for over a year, but that the subsequent transfer to Miss Callista occurred without full disclosure or consent, under familial pretense." No one interrupted. Not even them. I took a deep breath, nodded, and pressed play on my phone. The audio was scratchy, but audible. Vera's voice: "O'Dellin's sweet, but she wasn't built for success. She's too passive. You're marketable." Laughter followed. Male, Jason's. No one laughed now. The room fell into a stunned hush. One of the board members looked directly at Vera. Another leaned back slowly in her chair. Callista lowered her eyes. No defense, no spin, just silence. This was what my silence had been buying all along. Precision, not revenge, not bitterness, just facts, arranged carefully like tiles I once picked for a kitchen they swore was never mine. The verdict didn't come immediately. The board said they'd deliberate privately. We left the room in separate directions. 3 days later, I received a certified letter. Due to multiple procedural missteps, lack of verified consent, and the use of a previously registered corporate entity belonging to Miss O'Dellin, the transfer of ownership has been deemed invalid and reversed. The property will remain frozen under arbitration until legal title is reassigned. I didn't post about it. I didn't call anyone. I simply drove to the villa that Sunday morning. I parked in the driveway Callista once filmed herself walking down in heels and hoop earrings, proclaiming, "Hard work pays off." I walked through the gate with the new keys. No announcement, just presence. Inside, it smelled like artificial jasmine. I opened the windows, let the ocean air burn through it. Then I walked out the back door, down to the beach. The same sand where I'd once stood holding a rejection slip while they clinked champagne glasses over Callista's manifested future. The wind pressed against my jacket. I pulled out a small envelope and held it for a moment. Inside was the old airline ticket, the one they gave me as a gift. I walked to the mailbox, folded the paper once, slipped in a note. I kept it longer than I should have. Dropped it, then turned away. No more waiting for recognition. No more begging to be seen. Let them wonder what it meant. Let them learn what silence really sounds like when it no longer pleads. It moves, and it ends things. The road home was quiet. Not the villa, the one with ocean views and manicured hedges, but the modest two-bedroom condo tucked behind a dune trail, where the sea whispered rather than roared. I pulled into the carport just as the sun dipped below the horizon, turning the sky the color of a healed bruise. This was mine. The lock clicked open with a weightless turn of the key. No tension, no ghost of someone else's expectations standing on the other side. Just me and the scent of lemongrass from the diffuser I'd forgotten to unplug before leaving. I kicked off my shoes and walked barefoot across the wooden floor, feeling each smooth plank press up against my skin like a grounding truth. 2 days later, the email came. It was Vera's name in the from field, but the words were all Callista. They always were. Given the unexpected situation, we were wondering if, just temporarily, you'd be open to letting us stay at the Pontevedra property, just until things settle. We know this is a lot to ask, but we're family. I read it 5 times. No, I'm sorry. No, we were wrong. No ownership. Only another soft-pitched request, another attempt to step over boundaries with a smile and entitlement. I stared at the blinking cursor for a long time before typing, "Unfortunately, it's already been promised, to someone who saw me first." And that was that. The rest of the week passed like exhaling after a held breath. I brewed my morning coffee in silence, sat by the window with a worn paperback, and watered the succulents that had somehow survived my absence. My phone buzzed a few times, mostly from former clients who had found their way back after the storm cleared. One message caught my eye. It was from the nonprofit I'd quietly begun supporting, a scholarship fund for first-generation female college students. The young woman I sponsored sent a short note. "I'm starting classes next week. I didn't think people like you existed, thank you." I didn't reply immediately. Instead, I looked up at the quiet walls of my condo, traced the path from kitchen to window to desk. Every piece of furniture was chosen because I loved it. No one's opinion had filtered in. No one's name sat on the deed but mine. There was no applause, no parade, just peace. That night, I pulled down the old scrapbook I hadn't opened in months. On the first page, carefully laminated, was the rejected airline ticket, the one I'd carried through every twist of this mess, the one they tossed aside, never thinking it mattered. Underneath it, in my own handwriting, I'd scrawled, "I never boarded, but I still took off." It was never about revenge. Not really. I didn't change the locks to keep them out. I changed them to protect what I'd finally built for myself. It wasn't bitterness that kept me from replying to their calls. It was clarity. And it wasn't money that gave me freedom. It was finally realizing I didn't need their permission to be enough. They called me passive. I call it precision. They said I was quiet, but I was never weak. And when the world finally heard my side, it was because I'd learned how to speak with more than just words. I didn't cut them off because I won the lottery. I cut them off because I finally understood. You don't have to open your door to people who always made you feel like a guest in your own life. Sometimes, the loudest stand you can take is simply walking away, with dignity intact and truth on your side. Have you ever been treated like a background character in your own family story? Tell me in the comments. I read everyone. Subscribe for more stories like this, because some family drama isn't fiction, it's just finally being told.